Okay, here's another one of these videos where I wanted to, really for my own edification and share with you, compare a couple different ways to play older games and see what's the best and what's the worst. So in the upper section, you see an SNES running Super Ghouls and Ghosts. On the left, you see the Switch Online version. And on the bottom right, you see the SNES Mini Classic version. The first thing, we're just going to get it right out of the way, but it's going to come back to haunt us throughout this short video, is that the SNES version is a bit dimmer. Also, these are not running in tandem, partly because of editing, partly because I do think they run at slightly different speeds. No matter how much I tweak them, they were running at different speeds, so I gave up on it. But you're going to see, right out of the gate, SNES is dimmer and slightly blurrier, whereas the Switch and Mini Classic look nearly identical. We'll get into a little closer up on that in a second. However, I was pleasantly surprised that although I'm running a 2-chip SNES, my original childhood SNES, and the 2-chip refers to the model, which is the least good of the original SNES models. It's better than I expected after having played through the Mini Classic version recently and thinking how bright and good the game looked. But the SNES, it shows, and we'll see it a little closer up in a second. One of the things I wanted to get out of the way right away is that Switch and Mini Classic appear to be running a very similar or nearly identical emulator. Take a look at things like the details in the trees in the background and the sprites, and the brightness and the color. I mean, it's just like, I'm no expert at all, but it looks nearly identical. And, you know, effectively it seems like I could have almost done this video with only comparing SNES to one of these two options, but hey, now we know. So now here we switch over to the SNES, which is again a classic original SNES running through an upscaler with brightness and contrast and all kinds of adjustments to make it look as good as it can. Both versions have slowdown, but again, you can see it's a little dimmer, a little muddier, sort of, a little blurrier, especially if you zoom in on the sprites on the SNES. One of the takeaways from this was it's not as bad as I thought. It still looks pretty good. But I'm using a very high-end upscaler, the framemeister. Now here, all I'm showing you, I'm kind of doing an SNES versus SNES comparison of some different framemeister settings. The video on the right is also SNES sped up very quickly while I'm adjusting some settings, just to take a look if I can get it any better. And now I'm going to keep that one just for comparison's sake. I don't know if I made it any better. It's really hard to tell. It's almost a matter of choice. I think the original setting on the left is better. But again, you still can see the Switch version on the bottom. It just looks crisper. It looks cleaner. The brightness, the color contrast, everything is just perfectly set. Whereas you can see the original hardware SNES on both upper screens just isn't quite as vibrant. To use a non-technical, but the way I feel about a term. So what's my takeaway here and my conclusion? Given that most people these days are going to have access to something like Ghouls and Ghosts through the Switch, it's the best way to play it, honestly. It feels like it's the quickest and easy way to play it. Although if you're a hardware purist and a retro aficionado like myself, there's no harm done. You're going to spend a lot of money on cables and technology to get your old SNES running on a modern flat screen, but it looks better than I thought. And back to that 2-chip issue, I'm looking into getting myself either a 1-chip or a SNES Mini to maybe see if I can get even better graphical fidelity. Maybe look for videos on that sometime in the future. Who knows? But as you can see, the SNES version is clearly, of the 3 choices that are available here in this video, is the one that, let's just say it, looks the worst. But it's better than I expected. I think I said that before, but I went into this expecting, like, oh boy, I'm really going to show how bad my SNES looks. I'm all about this hardware purity, and then it looks so bad, and it doesn't. It's just not quite as bright. And the Mini Classic has the option of you can hack it and add a certain number of ROMs to it. Not all of the SNES ROMs, but many. So it's another great way to play your SNES catalog these days if you want to do a little bit of tinkering with a Mini Classic edition. So that's it. Hate and unsubscribe. I don't care. I do this for myself and my own enjoyment, but I hope you liked it. Thanks.